Traditionally, in China and other authoritarian states, the succession to leadership didn't happen on schedule, and there was bloodletting and struggle. And recently, the Chinese seem to have solved this problem of orderly succession. So we were expecting a very smooth power transition because Xi Jinping, who's designated as the new top leader of China, had been the heir apparent for 5 years. In our book, my co-author and I try to look at Chinese foreign policy from the Beijing policymakers' point of view. And I think what we see there is a sense on the part of Chinese policymakers of their vulnerability. So to begin with, within their own borders, they have a lot of insecurity with the Tibetans, with the Uyghurs, with their population, and they see foreign governments and foreign civil society putting their fingers in there to encourage the Tibetans to help dissidents and things like that. And then around their borders, they have a lot of difficult countries, Russia, Korea, Japan, Taiwan, Vietnam, India, and so on, Pakistan. All of these countries, they have worked hard to stabilize relations, and they've done that for the most part. But they're all countries that are dangerous, that have different national interests from China. Then you see the US, which has military bases and alliances all around China. And then you see that the Chinese economic model, and with it their political stability, depends on this manufacturing and export, which causes them to be interdependent with the US and Europe, and to depend on markets, and also to depend on raw materials imports, a lot of which they import in order to use to export to somebody else. So they find themselves in a kind of box, both in a military sense and in an economic sense, because of all of these factors. At the same time, though, they're proud of their growth. They know that their economy is growing, that with that comes prestige and influence. They have a permanent UN Security Council seat. No world issue can be settled without their voice. And they're building up their military, and in particular building up their navy and certain missile forces that they can use to stand off the American Navy in a conflict that could occur around Taiwan or in the East China Sea or the South China Sea. So islands have a 200-mile exclusive economic zone. That was never before the case in history. Well, that's worth a lot. And it has a great military value now that China's developing a navy, which is that these islands are among a chain of islands that kind of contain the Chinese Navy. If you own those islands, you can sail out, right by them, and that you have a right to do so. So the Chinese attitude is, I'm not giving up this claim. It's worth a lot to me. And they feel that Japan is weak. And they feel the US is weak as well, because they think, look at the US. It's involved in all these wars. It says it's going to cut its defense budget. It has presidents that can't do anything because they have Congresses that won't let them. I think that their foreign policy going forward is a mix of this sense of defensiveness, that a lot of the rest of the world is out to get me, and I'm in a vulnerable position, together with a sense that it's my turn to be a great power, and I'm going to begin to assert my interests in the world. But China has a huge amount of problems at home. They've been pushing this rate of economic growth by pushing exports and by depriving their own population of the consumer economy that they want. There are still a lot of poor people in China, a lot of people that are out of work. There's a big environmental price that they've been paying for these exports that they produce. They have insecure control over some of the largest pieces of their own territory that are occupied by ethnic minorities that don't like Chinese government rule. The society is changing with economic growth, changing so rapidly in its citizens' expectations and in its culture and in the technology of the internet and social media, that the government has a hard time staying on top of all of these things. And so they've invested a huge amount in the security apparatus, which has done a good job, as security apparatuses do their job. But has also created a lot of distrust and resentment because they don't have a rule of law system for keeping order. They really just empower the cops to do whatever the cops think they need to do. So I think the society faces, you might say, a lot of domestic drag on this greatness that they're looking for. And there's quite a broad consensus in China, even within the leadership and within the Communist Party, that the political system fundamentally needs what they call reform.